E3 2021 was fucking trash. It was garbage. There were a few good announcements, but it really didn't matter. Most of the games that were announced were either indie titles, or they were first-person shooters, or they were sequels and spin-offs. Not much new in terms of fresh IP. And then a lot of the press conferences for the companies that did show up at E3 didn't really have much to announce. Now, by far the best press conference that was at E3 is Microsoft. Microsoft did a decent job. I wouldn't say they did a great job. They have some issues with their press conference that I'm going to discuss. But before I get into it, I want to take a look at some of the announcements, some of the biggest announcements from E3 2021. So we have Elden Ring here. Now, from a lot of the opinions that I've seen on this game online, a lot of people are looking forward to this blindly, which doesn't surprise me. This is the video game community, which is full of fanboys and shills and drones and whatever other term that you want to use to describe people who will just blindly follow a company over a cliff if they could. But this game looks like Dark Souls 4. It looks extremely derivative. It doesn't look new at all. You can tell they're reusing the same engine that they've used in all of their other fucking games. The gameplay in the camera looks pretty much exactly the same. And some of the bosses that they showed off in this trailer look like scrapped Dark Souls designs from their older games that they're just reusing here. So, nothing new from software, just their usual stick, their one-trick pony shit that they keep doing over and over again. And you even have fanboys that are calling them out on their bullshit now. I'm going to reserve full judgment for when they actually show off, the game and engine with the HUD and everything. But from what I've seen so far, it's the same shit. Nothing new here. We have the Avatar game, which was announced, but no gameplay was shown for that. And I think this trailer is very misleading because this game is actually a first-person game. And I believe you can only play as the Na'vi. And just going down the list, a lot of the announcements were like this. Either they were trailers for games that didn't showcase any gameplay, or are misleading as to what the game is actually going to be, which is why you should show gameplay of some kind when you announce a video game. Or the announcements themselves were just like DLC for upcoming games or games that have already been released, or the announcements were just underwhelming in general. This is a theme that's stretched almost across the board entirely. There wasn't really a whole lot of big announcements, but I'm going to go through the press conferences and go through everything that was announced at each major press conference. So starting off here with Bandai Namco, whom I believe had the worst showcase at E3. They literally showed off one game, which is House of Ashes from Supermassive Games. Supermassive Games is known primarily for their PlayStation 4 exclusive Until Dawn, which was great. Everything that they've done since then with this Dark Pictures anthology, I think it's called, which includes games such as Man of Dawn and Little Hope. This is apparently the third and I believe the final game of this anthology. And the previous two games, I didn't play Little Hope, but I did play Man of Dawn, and I did upload a retrospective for that game around the time of release when that game came out a few years ago. And I was not impressed, and I was actually pretty disappointed, the same as many other people who were looking forward to what Supermassive Games had in store after Until Dawn. And basically every game within the Dark Pictures anthology is just these cheap horror narrative-driven games that so far have suffered from the same usual issues, which includes bad storytelling, annoying characters, a small budget, boring gameplay, among a myriad of other different things that's wrong. So aside from House of Ashes, we obviously had the Elden Ring announcement, which I just spoke about. And then we have the upcoming Scarlet Nexus game, which I did play the demo for that. And that's really just a lesser quality version of the Final Fantasy VII Remake, which means it's not really worth shit. There's nothing at all to look forward to from Bandai Namco. As someone in the comments, the only comment on this article, mentioned Xenoverse 3, Dragon Ball Xenoverse 3. That would have been something to somewhat get excited over, or at least anticipate, but who knows if they're ever going to make a Xenoverse 3. At this point, Xenoverse 3 will never see the light of day. Terrible showcase from Bandai Namco. From Ubisoft, they showed off Rainbow Six Extraction, which is just another Rainbow Six game, but it's with aliens, and it's like Tom Clancy is not about aliens. Tom Clancy is about like the military and espionage and all that shit. So that was a strange announcement. They also announced a Far Cry 6 Season Pass where you can play as all of the villains or whatever from Far Cry 3 through Far Cry 5. And this special DLC that they're releasing alongside Far Cry 6. I think that's an interesting announcement. But if you really don't care about the direction that the Far Cry series has gone over the last few years, then there's no reason to really get excited about this. They also announced a Mario Rabbids Sparks of Hope game, which I believe is like, I don't know, I was told it's some kind of turn-based game. So this is the game in action. I'm not really a Nintendo person, so I'm not going to get this. And I don't think too many people really care about this outside of that core Nintendo audience. So I guess this is good for the people that's within that specific target group. But I'm not a part of that audience once again. Then we have the stupid Aiden Pierce DLC from Watch Dogs Legion, which I already denounced last year. And Watch Dogs Legion turned out to be a mediocre piece of shit anyway. So definitely won't be supporting that. We have a Rocksmith announcement with Rocksmith Plus. If I'm not mistaken, they ended support for Rocksmith quite some time ago. Now, I don't know too much about the Plus, this new version of Rocksmith, but that's good, I guess, for anyone that cares. Although, as someone who actually plays guitar, I mean, I guess this is cool, but you're better off just buying Guitar Pro and just practicing that way, along with a metronome and some YouTube videos to help you out. They announced this Riders Republic game, which honestly looks rather good to me. I can see why someone would be interested in something like this, and I can also see how someone would spend hours playing this game and not get bored. Whoever the team was that was working on this game, I think they did a pretty good job. We'll have to see if this game turns out to be a success, although for me personally, I still don't have any plans on picking this up. I'm not really a fan of mass multiplayer games like this. And then the rest of the trailers were basically updates to games that are already on the market now. So Ubisoft, they didn't really have a great press conference. There was nothing that they announced that's really interesting or that pushes the envelope for video games. Very underwhelming overall. As for Xbox and Bethesda, there wasn't a whole lot of interesting announcements. I think the best thing that they showed off obviously was Halo Infinite, which is something I'm looking forward to. I think that game's going to be pretty surprising when it comes to the story. And the multiplayer is something I'm looking forward to. I do plan on picking this up, and I will be playing both the campaign and the multiplayer. I think it's great that the series is going free to play on console and that they're trying to combine both audiences on PC and on console. That's a great move. That's a brilliant move by them. And it's very pro-consumer. So hopefully they continue to go in that direction for the future. Starfield, that was another good announcement, although there was no gameplay shown for that, so we'll have to wait and see what the actual gameplay looks like. A lot of people are excited about Forza Horizon 5. Again, I don't play racing games, but for the people that care, good for you. And, we have other announcements such as Redfall, Contraband, and a few others. Were some decent announcements, but nothing that was too out of the ordinary. The problem with Microsoft's press conference is the fact that, for the most part, it was filled with a bunch of indie titles. Another problem with their showcase was that there's too many first-person shooters that was showcased, and there's not enough of the games that they revealed last year that made an appearance at E3 this year. Even their extended showcase was pretty disappointing. The biggest game that was supposed to appear here is Hellblade 2 from Ninja Theory, and they've already confirmed that the game has yet to enter full production, So the game sounds like it's still in its very early stages as far as the development goes. And so the developers really didn't have anything to show. More or less, this was just a reminder that the game is still in development, and they're still working on it. Despite the somewhat questionable showcasing, Microsoft obviously had the best showcase at E3, which isn't saying much because Sony chose to opt out of E3 this year, which isn't the first time that they've done this. And I am interested in a few of the games that they did announce, such as Starfield, Stalker 2, Redfall. I want to see that game in action. Contraband, I want to see that in action. But again, none of these games sounds like they're huge departures from what Microsoft is usually known for, with few exceptions. So overall, nothing to truly get excited about at the moment. Halo Infinite was the best game that they showed during their showcase. You have Nintendo with their Nintendo Direct, and the only thing that they really announced that's worth talking about is they announced Shin Megami Tensei 5, which is for a part of this JRPG series that's been around for years. Apparently that's coming out on November the 12th, so I'm sure there's quite a big niche audience that's looking forward to that. They also announced a sequel to Zelda Breath of the Wild, which isn't surprising given that game's success, so I'm sure you have a bunch of people that are looking forward to that as well, although the release date is slated for next year in 2022. And then we have Metroid Dread. This is not Metroid Prime 4. I do not know why they have this listed as Metroid Prime 4 / Metroid Dread. Metroid Dread is a sequel to Metroid Fusion, which came out years ago, I believe, on the Game Boy Advance. The only Metroid game I've ever played is Metroid Zero Mission, which I actually enjoyed a lot. So that's great that they're making another Metroid game. Apparently, I think they're still working on Metroid Prime 4. It was announced a long time ago that they had to restart that game's development because something went wrong behind the scenes. But I'm sure Metroid Dread will be a great appetizer until Prime 4 is revealed once again. Oh, and Nintendo did confirm that Metroid Prime 4 is still in development. So that's about the only game that's going to encourage me to buy a Nintendo console. So when they show off Metroid Prime 4, I will be paying attention to that. But outside of that, there was nothing really interesting that was announced at Nintendo's Direct. You have Capcom, who didn't really announce much. The only thing they did announce was some new Great Ace Attorney game, which apparently are just two older games that are apparently being ported over to the West for the first time. There's a new Monster Hunter game that they announced, which is apparently due for release exclusively to Switch on the 9th of July. And they confirmed that they're working on the DLC for Resident Evil Village, which isn't a surprise. We already knew that DLC was coming for that game at some point. And the god-awful Resident Evil Reverse game, online multiplayer game, is going to go live next month. And I'm sure the player base for that game is not going to be extensive. So nothing really new or interesting with Capcom's press conference. Then we have the kicker, that is the Square Enix press conference. And they had the second to worst conference after Bandai Namco. They announced some mobile titles with Hitman Sniper and some Nier game called Nier Reincarnation or whatever the hell that is. They announced a remastered collection for Life is Strange, which there's not much reason to care about that unless you're a huge fan of those games. They announced some kind of pixel remaster for the original Final Fantasy games, which I guess is like the first 6. However, apparently they're only going to be available on Steam and mobile. So if you don't have a gaming PC, then the only way you can play the so-called pixel remaster is on your phone. Yeah, Babylon's Fall, which is a game I was really looking forward to. However, they announced that this game has been reworked to be basically a live service multiplayer co-op game. And so yeah, that basically killed my interest in this. It seems that they're going to use this game as a vehicle to try and make easy money off of microtransactions and DLC. So that's very disappointing. They announced the expansion for Black Panther: War for Wakanda for the Avengers game. I'll probably end up playing it, but I'm definitely not going to go back to playing the game, the actual main game itself, due to how terrible it is. So won't be doing that. Then they had the Guardians of the Galaxy game, which received mixed reception. I'm going to play it simply because I'm a huge fan of the Guardians of the Galaxy. Love the movies, love the characters, so I'm hoping this turns out well, but we'll see. And then obviously we have the terrible Final Fantasy Origins game, which just looks like a lazy Neo slash Souls clone copy paste job from Team Ninja and Koei Tecmo. I don't know why Square Enix keeps doing collaborations with them, but for whatever reason they keep allowing them to take reins on different projects within the Final Fantasy franchise. I think it's a bad partnership, especially given how terrible Dissidia NT was, which almost entirely rested on the shoulders of Koei Tecmo and Team Ninja. And a lot of people have been clowning on this game, and for good reason. The characters look ridiculous, the dialogue is terrible, the gameplay looks boring and derivative, and the art style looks very dreary. And just been there, done that with Final Fantasy 15, done much better in that game versus what I'm seeing in this trailer. So, Square Enix's press conference all the way around was just weak, uninspired, and pretty boring. The only thing that they announced that I really cared about was Guardians of the Galaxy, and I don't even know if that's going to turn out to be any good, although I'm rooting for it to be good. I have to see about that, but yeah, everything else was just underwhelming. There was nothing really new or exciting. And then another thing I noticed is that if you actually take a look at a lot of the games that were announced at E3, almost every single game that was showcased is going to be on PC. Almost every single one. Now I'm just scrolling through the list here, but I see a lot of PC titles here, which further invalidates any reason to pick up the next gen consoles if you don't already have either a Series X or a PlayStation 5. And to make matters worse, there were a lot of games that were missing from E3 2021, such as Metroid Prime 4, Final Fantasy VII Remake Part 2, Beyond Good and Evil 2, Skull and Bones, Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League, which actually surprised me. I was actually expecting some of these titles, some of these WB game titles to appear at this year's show, but it didn't happen. Hogwarts Legacy was missing, Gotham Knights was missing, remake to Prince of Persia Sands of Time, which I believe they actually delayed to spend more time with the development, I guess to try and beef up the game's graphics, hopefully. That was missing. Final Fantasy 16 was missing, Pragmata was missing, Bayonetta 3 was missing, Fable was missing, The Elder Scrolls 6 was missing. There's just so many games that were just not at this show. I just don't understand what the point is. Even Ghostwire Tokyo, and I believe that game's slated for release sometime later this year, unless it was delayed to 2022. So unfortunately, there was not much reason to care about this year's show. A lot of games that were missing, a lot of games that were announced that didn't have any gameplay shown, a lot of games who did have gameplay shown but are just within the same genre. Too many first-person shooters again, too many indie titles again, just not much reason to care. And apparently there's like a new From Software game called Velvet Veil, which is allegedly a spiritual successor to Bloodborne, as it states here. But there was no announcement of a Velvet Veil from any developer at E3, so again, all in all, this year's show was very, very weak. Yeah, there's not much reason to care about E3 anymore at this point. Now, we are coming off of a year after, COVID-19 and everything, but it seems to me that these gaming companies don't really have anything to show. And if they don't have anything to show, then there's no point in having an E3. E3 traditionally is supposed to be the biggest showcase for video games across the entire year of any given year. And over the last few years, it's slowly gotten worse and worse and worse. And now is basically borderline irrelevant. So I'm really hoping they come back strong next year, because if they don't, I'm not going to waste my time with E3 anymore. There was too many missed opportunities with this year's showcase, and the games that were announced, most of them, the vast majority of them, just look boring. And been there, done that, copy paste, derivative, and not very interesting. So hopefully they come back strong next year.